to an episode of Jacob's House of Rock. And today we have my full review of this brand new next generation 2019 Rickenbacker, aka Chinese Rickenbacker copy bass. So this is my brand new, newest version of this kind of bass. I actually have a pretty popular video on my channel, which I'm blown away just by how popular it is, but I did do a review of this one like a year or two ago. And this is, you know, an older generation version of these things, which I've since done a whole series on how I've been modding it, so this thing is not stock at all. But since I've seen they've made some improvements with these things, I decided to pick up a brand new one, just to kind of compare the two, and, you know, have a much more accurate copy. So I bought this thing off of AliExpress. They're one of those websites, kind of like Wish.com or Alibaba or something like that. And basically, they have factory direct products primarily from China, and they make these bases to order from there. And yeah, so let me kind of cover some ground with Rickenbacker bases. So they're Rickenbacker's an American company. They've been making the classic sort of instruments used by a lot of great musicians like the Beatles, Rush of Geddy Lee, and Chris Squire of what's it called? Yes, the band. And I've been a huge fan of this sort of bass design for a long time, and I've always dreamed of having one. However, they have been far too expensive for me to ever justify owning one. The real deal goes for like $3,000 on average, and that is immensely expensive for, in my opinion, for something which is an instrument, something which is proven by today's modern technology and many other guitar brands that can be made for far less. And this instrument is a great example of that. So yeah, let's talk about my my experience buying this thing, because actually it was a little bit complicated. So after getting my first one, this first original one isn't very accurate, and we'll get into it during this video as I compare the two. But a big part of that was it has a set neck, which means that this neck is one piece of wood, or perhaps it's made of multiple pieces of wood. It's hard to tell. Regardless, it's one piece of wood that is, or just one neck that is glued into this body piece, which is made of a separate chunk or chunks of wood. However, the real deal, genuine Rickenbacker basses are made of a piece of wood that goes all the way through the body and stops down at the base here, and these side pieces are later glued on to this plank of wood that goes down the middle. Sometimes it's made of multiple pieces of wood, but the important bit is they're cut this way, and not bits of wood that are cut this way, so the neck is glued in. And this sort of helps add to that sort of feel and sustain of the instrument. It's generally sort of a known as a more sort of fancy way of building an instrument. More high-end instruments kind of have that sort of build, and I'll explain why in a little bit. But that was one of the major things which made me want to get this new one. Another thing is I wanted it to be a different color, because I really I only got this black one because that was the only one they happened to have in stock at the time where I ordered that one. I actually wanted more of a cream one, kind of like Chris Squire, but later I changed my mind and went with a burst color. The main reason being actually was because I wanted a clear to see the wood grain, so I could definitely confirm that this thing was a neck through instrument. But yeah, before we get to the comparison, let's kind of talk about this specific instrument in general. So this instrument is actually really accurate to the original basses. Nowhere near exact, of course. I actually asked them to do a lot of custom modifications when I ordered this thing. However, they didn't do most of them, unfortunately. I asked them to change the scale length, I asked them to change the width of the neck at the nut here, I asked them to a couple of subtle details with the coloring, which they didn't do. I wanted a very light colored fretboard material, because real Rickenbacker basses, they don't use rosewood or like a dark kind of wood, nor do they use maple for the fretboard. The rest of the basses are usually made of maple though, but the fretboard is some kind of other weird wood that's kind of like an in-between color. It's like a very either a very dark sort of maple color or a very light rosewood color. It's just kind of like an in-between color, almost the same color as this kind of like brown here, if you can picture that. So I wanted a much lighter looking fretboard, and I got one which is pitch black, basically. Now, what it turns out this fretboard happens to be, at least some people in the comment section of my unboxing of this thing said, is that this is a rosewood fretboard that has been glossed over, lacquered, which is what I asked for. I did ask for the fretboard to be lacquered, because the original bases, they do have a nice shiny lacquered fretboards. This one actually looks a little more matte than what I was expecting it, but still shinier than your typical sort of fretboard material. Yeah, it's not what I asked for, which is a shame, but it still looks pretty awesome with it regardless. You guys can have a closer look at that. It actually kind of reminds me a lot of Rosacer, which is a rosewood alternative. It's actually just a treated maple that's been made to look very dark, and it's like a very matte finish kind of wood. I can show you an example of it. They're used in a lot of Harley Benton guitars because there's some issues with rosewood these days and how to post it internationally, so that's what that looks like on this Harley Benton guitar. So the fretboard material does look very similar to that. Of course, you can see it does have the Rickenbacker Made in USA logo here, so it is a counterfeit instrument. Apparently in the US, some of you may have issues if you're buying these things, because apparently Customs doesn't have anything better to do than to filter out people's basses, and you may have issues with Customs. However, I don't know, I've heard, you know, lots and lots of people in the US have managed to get these through Customs, so I wouldn't really worry about it too much. I think it's a common thing to ask the sellers to either remove the pickguard before you put it on, have it blank, or have them paint over it with something that you can later remove. I didn't have any issues with mine. Of course, I live in Australia, so I don't think they really give a shit about American brands and counterfeits of those and all that sort of stuff. But yeah, so this bass is absolutely a neck-through bass. Even though this finish is really dark, like, they did a beautiful job, by the way, with this finish, which I'll get into in a moment, but even though this finish is very dark, I can still make out that this piece of wood is continuous throughout the whole neck here, all the way to the headstock here. It's actually not one plank of wood, it's actually two pieces of wood laminated together this way, so there's a split running down the very middle, which you'd think is a bad thing, because it means they cheaped out on wood and didn't use one solid piece of wood and all that blah blah blah. But no, actually that is a really good thing, and most high-end guitars, really high-end ones, actually use this method. And the reason being, if you use two pieces of wood down lengthways down a neck, that actually helps make it a much more stable neck, because it may have issues in different climates with and it may warp because of that, and different moisture levels and stuff like that. But having two pieces of wood going this way, those two pieces of wood, if they want to warp, both of them kind of help stop each other going in either way, because one may want to warp one way may want to warp the other way, and they kind of stabilize each other. So that actually is a pretty nice touch. So I actually really enjoy the feel of this sort of neck through design. It's really pretty great. Another great benefit, benefit and a thing they did really well on this guitar bass, like I was saying, is the finish. So if you can see that there, it is a beautiful sort of nice, very earthy brown burst that they did, and there's some really great wood grain coming through. What I asked for was them to, I sent a couple of pictures through of a Rickenbacker bass with this sort of rare type of finish called an autumn glow or autumn burst, something like that. And it's kind of like similar to their fire glow ones, except for it's this less orangey burst and more of this sort of earthy tone. I don't know how to describe it exactly, but you know, it's more of this sort of more of a brown color than less of that sort of bright orangey color, and it looks really beautiful in this thing. And all around, just look at that that coloring that they did here. Really well done. Love the look of this wood down the neck and the headstock here, looking really good. Very nice. They also did a really good job on the truss rod cover here. The logo is a lot more thicker and clearer than it came out on my previous bass. However, it's still a shame that these things are 2D instead of the 3D logos that they have on the real Rickenbackers. Of course, if you want to get a real Rickenbacker trusswood cover, they go for exponentially huge prices online. I've looked for them because I thought it would be kind of cool to have a real one on there, that 3D design, but no, they're very, very, very expensive. They did a good job of the fretwork on this thing. It's not leveled perfectly, or not set up perfectly at least, so there is actually quite a bit of buzz. So yeah, you can hear there's a fair amount of buzzing, especially on this, what is it called? The D string here, the two middle strings actually have quite a bit of it. And some of that might be due to this bridge here. The bridges on these Rickenbacker basses aren't the best, actually. They have kind of an issue with getting the neck radius down, because they are built really flat. The fretboard is curved this way, so there's kind of a curve running down it this way. So you need the bridges here to have the two middle saddles slightly raised higher than the two outer saddles, just to kind of account for the roundness of the fretboard here. So that is one thing. There's a slight bit of buzz. However, the frets came out really shiny, really fresh looking, which is great. And the edges of them are nice and cleanly done. There's no sharp edges when you run your hand down here. And, you know, the binding work on the side and all of that is done really well. So good work there. Speaking of the bridge, one tip that I heard about making these bridges work is actually raising, there's like a little screw that holds it up in the middle here, and you raise that higher, and then you use these things on the side and tighten them quite a bit, and that kind of bends this bridge a little bit, and that helps account for the radius. Other people have put little just things to raise these little pieces underneath the bridge here, just to kind of, you know, raise them. Like I could picture somebody cutting up an aluminium can, like a Coca-Cola can, and kind of sliding a piece of metal under there to help raise that. That could work. But what I'm gonna do, because I happen to have it, because an awesome viewer of this channel sent in this beautiful hipshot replacement bridge, which is on my which I replaced the original bridge on this original Rickenbacker here, and I'm going to be putting that on this base here. So that's going to be something that I'm doing in a future video. I did a couple of videos detailing various modifications of this thing, so do be sure to check those out. It's a pretty in-depth series. I go through a lot of things. So basically on this original base, most of the electronics aren't stock at all. These tone knobs, these actual plastic knobs here, they're not stock either. The newer ones, but I'm getting some even different ones to go on this thing, which are going to be much more closer to what a real Rickenbacker has. And yeah, the pickups on this and the bridge are all different. And yeah, so this bass has been modded out quite a bit, and we're gonna basically combine all those modifications into this bass to make it the one superior bass that's the closest as you can get to a real Rickenbacker. So going back into this thing, the pickups here are the stock sort of typical pickups you always see in these Chinese Rickenbacker copy basses. They always have this fake toaster pickup, which I'll just show you guys here. It's meant to look like a classic toaster pickup, which is a very famous sort of Rickenbacker pickup that the older Rickenbackers tended to have. It's a bit rarer. However, that one was a special single coil pickup, just in this sort of weird casing. This one is actually a small humbucker pickup, as some people have taken these apart and shown. So this is actually a really good sounding pickup, but it is not, it's not a toaster pickup by any means, an actual one. And in the bridge position here, if you can see that, we have this interesting single coil pickup with these pole pieces. You can even see the strings aren't in line with it perfectly, which is a little bit odd. But yeah, it's got these nice big pole pieces, and it's a single coil pickup. I actually think it is an Alnico pickup, if I'm not mistaken, but I will be confirming that in my next video when I take this bass apart and we can look at the electronics close up, because I will be, replacing the electronics with all the new ones, which is going to be really interesting. But yeah, so those are the stock pickups, and they actually sound pretty good. I have no issues with the pickups here. They're pretty nice pickups for what you'd expect. This being like, a counterfeit instrument and not having the original ones. And usually Chinese instruments, they just slap whatever pickups they happen to have on hand in there. However, the ones here are not bad. Not bad at all. They sound somewhat Rickenbacker-y, but they have their own unique sound, which I do enjoy. But like I said, I'm going to swap them out because I want this thing to be absolutely as close to a real Rickenbacker as possible, and I've already got all the bits. So another thing that they didn't do is I wanted them to adjust the scale length to be closer to a real Rickenbacker. However, they made this one like a centimeter or something longer. I'll put the actual measurements on screen now for you guys. So those are the measurements of a real Rickenbacker at the top, and underneath that are the measurements of this bass. There we go. That gives you an idea that it's the difference is a little bit different, but it's fairly close. I don't know. I wish they'd have just listened to what I wanted and done it, but overall, it doesn't really bother me. I don't think that it's going to alter the sound dramatically, having that slight little difference in the scale length. Playability wise, it might feel a tad different, but I don't really mind. This thing pretty much looks and plays and will sound like a real Rickenbacker by the time we're done with it anyway, so a tiny bit doesn't really bother me. What else can we talk about? Oh yes, another great thing they improved on with this bass is the amount of frets and the positioning of the bridge and the positioning of the pickups has all been altered between these two basses. So I'll bring them in, both of them in here. You can see this original one, the black one here, is a little bit taller than the new one, and that is because they gave it two extra frets down here. So you can see up to the last inlay, this one, the more accurate new one, only has 2 frets, whereas the original one has 1, 2, 3, 4 frets after that last inlay. And the problem with this is it extends the neck to go further, so that means if you want to keep the scale length, you have to move the bridge up a little bit higher. So this bridge is really close to the bridge pickup here. And also the bridge pickup on this bass is lower down towards the bottom of the bass here. So the bridge pickup and the bridge are so close together that you can barely play the strings behind this little, I don't even know what you'd call this, just a little piece of metal that goes over the top of the bridge pickup. So yeah, you can barely play these things here, but I mostly play up near the neck anyway, but I would like this to be, as accurate as possible. Also the bridge actually not being flush with the bottom of the bass looks a little odd. It looks a little crowded in this area and not very accurate at all. However, on the new bass, they definitely fixed that. It's still not perfectly accurate, at least the positioning of the bridge here. It should still be a little more higher, more in line with this switch here, perhaps even flush with the pickguard. Because the pickguard is actually not fully accurate. I think they made it a little longer so it would look closer to the bridge pickup, which is a bit of a cheating way, instead of just drilling the hole for it properly and moving this up. I don't know why they did that, but it's still at a slightly better position. I've checked them against each other than the previous one, and because those two notes are much, they fix the amount of frets they have on the neck. The neck is a little shorter, means the scale length is kept the same pretty much, so the whole thing is moved down a bit so the bridge sits flush against the bottom of the bass, how it should be. So, very good with that. I've played this, and in my first review of it, my first unboxing, I said that on the middle position, when you have both pickups engaged, that they're both in phase, because the original bass, they were actually out of phase when you had the middle switch selected for both pickups. However, on later trying it later on, I actually confirmed that no, it actually still goes out of phase when you have both pickups engaged. which, you know, for some occasions could be great if you want like a really thin, snappy sort of bass sound. However, for the most part, I prefer it if when you blend the two pickups, it melds them together and you get a strong, thick sound, which is what's supposed to happen with the real wiring. Also, the way the tone pots are arranged and the way they interact with the tone and the volume is swapped around the way these are arranged from a real Rickenbacker. We'll go into that later on when we swap out the wiring and stuff like that. But yeah, they're a bit strangely arranged. And another great thing about this bass, and one of the things which we're going to explore in our further videos, is they added two outputs, or inputs, or whatever you want to call them there. But you can see them there. That's much closer to how a real Rickenbacker has it, because on the previous models, it didn't have that. They just had the one here, which, you know, functionally works great and everything. However, the reason Rickenbacker basses had those two outputs is because they had this feature known as Rico sound. Now, what Rico sound is it's a special circuit in these basses, which means that through one of these holes, you can plug in a normal mono cable and you can play it like a normal bass with both pickups, you know, playing at the same time through one signal. Or you can put a stereo cable into this, run it into a special little box, which I'm going to show you how to make later on, and that splits the signal of each individual pickup, so you can run them into different amplifiers, and you can have, for example, the neck pickup running into a very clean, smooth sounding amplifier, and you can have the bridge running into a kind of overdriven amp, and you can get this really cool stereo setup, and you can blend these sounds really well. And it's this kind of cool effect that a lot of great bass players, such as Chris Squire, have used to great effect to shape their tone. And one thing I'm going to do is I actually ordered a special piece. It's this really weird sort of switchcraft jack. I did a video unboxing it on my channel recently. It has a really weird, complicated name, but it's like a switchcraft open, close, mono make circuit switch something blah blah blah. I forgot what it's called. You can look up my other videos, they'll have information about that one. But I'm going to be using that to make a tutorial for you guys on how you can make a Rico sound circuit for your basses or guitars, or if you're, you know, modding a Rickenbacker yourselves. Touching more on the finish of this bass, like I was saying, I really love the color. when I was ordering this thing, you've got to be really vigilant and make sure the people making these basses actually make them to your liking, because the first one they showed me was stock, which meant it had no color on it. It was just a raw lacquer over the, you know, raw wood, and I was like, no, that's not what I wanted. And, you know, a couple of months passed, and eventually I asked them again if they remade me one, and they showed me this thing, and I'm just like, wow, that looks good, so I got it, even though it, you know, again, wasn't perfect to what I wanted. But there are some minor issues on this thing, this finish. Like, if you look at the top of this horn, you see there's some sort of wood peeping through or something, a lighter color just at the edge of the binding there. Also, this binding, it has this really cool zebra striping down the edge. However, that's not what I wanted. I wanted them to do a solid cream binding, just how they made my previous bass. So they ignored that. Thank you, China. But I do actually still like this binding. It looks really cool with the zebra stripes. It's just rude of them not to, you know, do what I asked, because I was pretty clear about what I wanted when I, you know, ordered this thing. You know, it's polished up really well over most of this bass. It feels great. But there is this one little part right here where the gloss, they didn't quite buff it properly. So if it doesn't feel, I wouldn't call it rough, but it feels a little like the gloss is a slight bit more lumpy than it is everywhere else. But this is like on the inside of this top horn here, and you're not gonna really notice it. Like, I don't think you can even really see it. You can see a little bit of it there in that like bright bit at the top, almost, kinda, I don't know. But you can slightly feel it, and I generally hold my bass here quite a lot when I'm carrying it around, so I notice it a lot. It doesn't bother me at all, really, because why would it? But it's just something to note since I'm reviewing this bass. And the the rest of the finish, like I said, immaculate. I love it. But this pickguard, just like on my first base, it arrived with a very roughly cut edge. So we'll just bring this up here. I don't know if you can see it, but there's a little bit of that white splintering off at the top there. And that's because it looks like this pickguard was just cut either by, somebody on a table saw just cut it out and didn't file it or sand it or anything and just put it right on this base. This isn't a big deal because I have sandpaper and I can just fix it easily by just removing it and doing that. So that's something that I'm going to do. But it's something to note, and this seems to be the case with all of these Rickenbacker bases. I don't know why they don't just buff the shit out of it for a second before putting it on. But yeah, whatever. I'm happy. The most important thing is they got the base body pretty much right, and I'm gonna talk about that right now. So one of the best things about this base that they improved on over the previous one, aside from of course being a neck through, is they got the contour. They removed this weird contour that they had on the top of this base here. If you can see this original one, this bit has this weird rounded section, like they took a belt sander and just went on the top of this base, and it's got this weird curve at the top, which is not accurate to any Rickenbacker bases. And this kind of makes it look really weird, and just like if you're familiar with Rickenbackers, you see this and you immediately go, okay, that's not accurate at all. So that's a telltale sign that you've got a copy, of course. However, I don't know if they do the stock now, which it did look like it was in the photos, but I specifically asked them to make the top flat, but I think they do the stock anyway if you look at the correct listing. And yeah, look at that. Nice flat top. Very cool, and I really like it this way. It's, far more accurate. It looks really great and has a nice sharp edge. It doesn't affect playability negatively at all, actually. The previous one did have that contour, and you'd think having a nice contour would make it easier to play or anything, but not at all, because your hand generally isn't resting on this edge here. At least for me, it's generally resting on like this part here, which on both of the bases is fairly sharp, and it's a smooth piece of wood to begin with, so it's not going to really bother you at all. So I really enjoy that they fixed that element of it. As for the body shape itself, I have mixed feelings about it. For example, the bottom here, this curved area around here, and this particular area right here with this sort of angle of this thing, looks a lot nicer than it does on this base. So if we look at the bottom of the curve here, compared to this one, it just kind of looks cooler and closer to the original. This one kind of looks a little more lumpy and just kind of weird, that the bottom edge. However, the horns, I actually feel the horns were a little better done on the original, because if you look at this smaller horn here, it kind of looks a little bit thin, and the shape is kind of just a little less accurate, a little more random looking than on this original one here. These have thicker, more confidently angled horns, and they're a little bit more closer to how they should be. So this is a downside of this one, because I kind of bugs me sometimes, this small horn here. I think a real Rickenbacker is somewhere between these two, actually, from what I've seen in pictures. So it's some a little bit of a nitpick with this one, but it is something, and probably the only thing that this new base does worse, or this old base does better over the new base, actually. The headstock is also a slightly different shape than the original one, so I will show you that, but you probably wouldn't tell without looking at them next to each other, but if you do kind of compare the two, you can already see the height difference here. And there's a bit of glare, sorry guys, so I'm trying to angle these in a way to show you. But here's the new one. Again, you can see the wood grain on this one looks absolutely beautiful at this headstock. I really love this, the different color woods. Speaking of the woods, I'm not sure what wood they made this out of course. I'm assuming the neck at the very least is made of maple, because that is what I asked them to do. The other wood on this, I don't know what it could be. Probably a cheaper wood, knowing these factories. It could be basswood, which I like to call basswood, which I kind of like the idea of having a base made of basswood. But that's just kind of a random idea of what it could be. It could be absolutely anything. It could all be made of maple, as far as I'm concerned. So who knows? But yeah, the wood and the wood grain looks absolutely beautiful. You can kind of get an idea of the shape here, and then you look at this one, and it's kind of got like wider. The fins are wider here, and the actual little top slidey piece, whatever this is called, angle little fin at the top here, is smaller and thinner than the one on this new neck. So I think the new one looks a little bit more balanced. I'm not sure if the tuning pegs are, centered really well. Something about them looks a little bit off, but on both bases it kind of does. So who knows? It could be very accurate, it could not be. But you wouldn't be able to tell without comparing it to the real deal, like hand in hand. So I don't really mind. And yeah, that's kind of my overall sort of opinion on the craftsmanship of this thing. Actually, also really like the feeling of the neck, because like I said, the fretwork on this thing is done in a way that it feels really nice and smooth. And I really just love the way this thing feels in hand, and playing it, even though, it's got that buzz which bugs me a little bit, but I'm going to work on fixing that for you guys, and for myself. Just to... But yeah, it feels great. The strings feel nice and bright and snappy, which I love, and it resonates really well. And the neck feels like it feels less chunky than the previous neck by a little bit. So it's got a slightly different shape, and I think this one's probably more accurate. I'm also not entirely sure, because some people in my previous video commented that the body seemed to look a little bit thick for a Rickenbacker. I'm not entirely sure how thick this one is, but I will measure it for you right now. It appears to be about 4 centimeters thick of bodywood material here, which translates to about 1.5 inches, maybe, yeah, just over 1.5 inches. So that gives you an idea of the body thickness. I will later look up how much a real Rickenbacker the body thickness should be, so I'm not sure about that. You can see here another thing that they've made really weird is the heel of the neck here comes out for almost twice as long as it should be, maybe a third too long. It should probably be just at the length of where the lower horn is. I think it should end somewhere about the length of this horn. But here they kind of made it a bit longer. It doesn't bother me at all, but it's another weird thing, which is like, why did you do that? I don't know. So we got our little ruler here. Before we get into our sound demo, of course, because I know a lot of you people in the comments are going to be writing stuff like, he starts playing the demo here, as if the rest of this review doesn't matter at all. I don't know. It gets on my nerves a bit when people skip to the sound demos, just because a lot of the times the sound demos are almost the least important part of these reviews, because they're so subjective to the gear that people are using, like the amps and the way they're playing and all of that sort of stuff, and the actual physical build of these things is really the most important thing, because you can always mod these to sound different, like pickups and whatnot. I don't know, guys. I'm gonna have in the description of this video, I'm gonna maybe in like a pinned comment, I'll let you guys know when I stop playing. But yeah, so the width of the nut here, at the nut, is 4.2 centimeters by the looks of it, which translates to about 1.5 inches, and then a little bit. I'm not sure how. I don't know very much about how to measure fractions of an inch. So I'm gonna say, just go to a thing and figure out how much 4.2 centimeters is in inches, and you guys can figure it out if you're using the imperial system, not the metric system. At the 12th fret, the width of the neck is 5.7 centimeters, which is 557 millimeters. So yeah, that's pretty much it for just kind of the review. I'm going to do a demo and, cut to my conclusions for you guys. So I hope you enjoyed that, and just, yeah, let me know what you guys think of this thing. Let's kind of hear some sounds from this thing, because like I said, the pickups, they're pretty good. I have some issues which the all I've done, I haven't set it up or anything. I've just tuned it. It might need another retune before I start playing it, but since I got it, I haven't done any setups or anything like that because I wanted you guys to have a review of this thing right out of the box, pretty much. So another issue is with the pickups. The bridge pickup is very low, which you know, I will adjust later. In fact, I won't even adjust later because I'm swapping it out, so I don't even care. But for the purposes of this demo, the bridge pickup is very low, and that's why it will sound pretty quiet compared to the neck pickup, which is at a really good position near the strings. In fact, it might be a little too high. Actually, it seems pretty alright. Something to bear in mind with the sounds. Also, the middle position does go out of phase, so if you want a good idea of what these pickups sound like, because I'm going to be a bit lazy and just do a really casual sort of playthrough, I'm not going to do a very specific sort of bridge pickup, neck pickup, DI signal, clean amp signal kind of thing, which I did with my original bass. So if you guys are interested in that, listen to my review, the demo of my original bass here, because that one has the same pickups. So this one sounds just like this one did when it came out of the box new. So they're pretty much identical in sound. So just watch that review. And yeah, before I get to that, I keep extending this, but sorry about that, guys. It also came with a little strap, which is something I didn't even show you guys in the unboxing. It's just a basic cheap ass strap, which you may never even use, but you know, why not? Nice little polyester strap, kind of looks like this. Basic stuff. You get 2 picks. There you go, like a green and an orange pick. And it also came with a basic cable here. Very simple cable. Probably not the best cable in the world, I would imagine, but if it works, it works. And an Allen key for adjusting the truss rod, which we may look at the truss rod in an upcoming video. I'm assuming it only has one. Real Rickenbacker basses have 2 truss rods running through the neck, which is something really weird that they have, but these Chinese ones usually have 1. Of course, you're likely no one's ever gonna know, because it's, you know, under here, and it still functions basically the same, but yeah, just a thing to note. So, yeah, let's get to this demo for you guys, and I apologize if it's gonna sound a bit shit. I'm a bit rusty with my playing at the moment, because my life has been really busy with some other stuff, some job searching and other fiasco. Alright, so I'm just using a mix of a DI signal from a SansAmp bass driver and my Ampeg little bass combo here. I'll show you that, guys. There's our Ampeg little bass combo and our SansAmp to the side there, and there is Godzilla from Godzilla Final Wars in X Plus figure form. So yeah, let's get to this demo. I hope you enjoyed that sound demo. I just want to conclude by saying I actually really like this bass. It has its issues. It has stuff that I'm, had just wish they could have done better. My main one actually just being this horn. But other than that, and some of the fret buzz. But there are ways of getting past fret buzz, worst case scenario, I may have to just level the frets, which is something that I've been meaning to learn how to do at some point, because I strongly believe that you guys should really know, if you're going to pursue playing an instrument, how to set up your instrument, how to modify and repair your instrument, and even how to, level the frets on it is a really great skill to have, and one that I'm yet to explore. But I have heard if you're getting one of these basses, it's good to actually wait maybe like 6 months at least, if not longer, for the woods to settle down, because these are built new to order, a lot of these, so they are made of very sometimes not the best sort of oldest wood, so they could be made of fairly fresh wood that still needs to kind of settle. That could be an issue, so wait a little while for the neck to really settle before you dive into adjusting the fretwork and stuff like that, is a tip that I've heard. But just something, not an expert on it, just something that I've heard that you guys, advice that might help you guys. But yeah, overall, I think this is for the price, because it's like less than a quarter of the price of an actual, actual Rickenbacker. Much less than a quarter, actually. What is these? I don't know. This thing cost me like $400 or $500 or something like that, and an actual Rickenbacker bass costs $3,000, which is just bloody insane. But yeah, you can get these things for really great prices for what they are. I guess you could, for the same price, you could probably get a better instrument, of course. Just by, maybe getting a Squier jazz bass or something like that. I mean, I've got my Fender Mexi jazz bass here, which I've modified quite a bit, and it is a fantastic instrument, but I would have settled for a Squier if I'd have been a little wiser back in the day with my money. But for what it's worth, this bass genuinely is fantastic for people looking for an affordable option for a Rickenbacker style bass. I don't think you can really go wrong with these things. I genuinely wish that Rickenbacker had an option, kind of like Gibson has Epiphone and Fender has Squier, and all those sort of different brands have their sort of cheaper variants. I really wish there was that option for these basses, but at the moment this is all we've got, and you can see they're getting better, and I think in a couple of years they're going to get really close. Like if they just tweaked it a little bit, just adjusted that scale length, made these horns a slightly better shape, and that just might be an issue with my model, not all of them, but if they just did that, these things could totally start to blow those Rickenbacker genuine ones out of the water, at least value wise, and I think this one already does, at least in terms of value. And yeah, I'm definitely gonna make this instrument into one of my main basses for sure, because I've been using this previous bass, this modified previous bass, a lot for recording. I love the sound of this thing. It's got that great Rick sound, but this is just going to take it to a whole nother level, and yeah, I'm really loving it. So that's it for this video. Don't forget to like and subscribe and all that jazz. I'm sorry it was a bit of a really mumbly long video, but there's a lot to unpack when you're looking at the, going through reviewing a thing like this. There's a lot to say. So I'm sorry if I kind of rambled on for a bit, but I hope you liked and enjoyed, and be sure to stick around for those future videos, because they are going to be really interesting, and I'm going to kind of let you guys know how it goes with all the fret buzz and how to deal with that and how the modifications come along. And we'll see this thing at the end, see what kind of a product and how close we can get this thing to the real deal. So yeah, that's it for this video. Keep on rocking, people. Peace out.